brothers and sisters in Christ. My name is Umnat Lamma, and today I have the pleasure of conducting a very special interview from St. Paul Church, Ethiopian Orthodox Warrior Church in DC. I am with Kesis Abaineh. It is an absolute pleasure to be speaking with you today. First off, how are you doing?
Pleasure to be here, Umnat. It's been a while, 2 weeks, 3 weeks since I have seen you in Las Vegas, so very
Yes.
good to see you.
Oh, yes, it was very good to see you too. Today we'll be conducting a just short interview, getting to know you, your work with SPAT, and just asking you a bit of advice and some questions that people might want to know.
Let's hit it off.
Okay, first question. Can you give me a brief overview of your history of becoming a case and how you came to DC, essentially?
Okay. First off, glory be to God for this moment, this time. Thank you for interviewing me here. Ace means priest for some of the people that might not understand what it means in Amharic. But yeah, my journey of becoming a priest in the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, I would say it's a very, very long journey that started, if I think from a young age. When I was early in my, I was probably 16, 17 is where I remember that I was very fervent and zealous within the church to serve. When I was back home in Ethiopia, I used to serve teaching young children, like choir, singing, instructing some Bible studies. At that time, even though I was young, but God put in my heart also just to help out the youth at that moment when I was young. But even after I come here, in every bit of my memory that I have, what God put in my heart of those memories is the interactions that I have with young adults or kids, teaching them. It could be in a choir or teaching. So it continued from young age in every growing of my age of giving service in teaching the next generation. So when I become here, I was a deacon back home in Ethiopia, and after I became here, I was serving in an organization that time called the Young Orthodox Christians. And since we are serving the church especially the young adults in the language they understand, we weren't able to have a priest that accommodated them to participate and to perform of the sacraments of the church. So that actually ignited in my heart to see the zeal and to ask of God's guidance if that is my path. And by the grace of God, after a while that I was called to be ordained by the bishop in the Demi area to be a priest. And that's where, in a nutshell, of me becoming a priest.
Well, that's absolutely wonderful. Do you remember which church in Ethiopia that you got your dikunat at?
So I used to serve at a church in Addis Ababa called Debre Salam Qudus Stephanus St. Stephen Church, which is around the Meskel Addababai area. I used to serve as a Sunday school student there. But at the same time, on my free time when I was in college, I used to go to Ba'ata Church. It's called Ba'ata La Mariam Church in Arat Kilo. And I used to learn of the traditional teachings of the church, the chantings, the guz and things like that, and the memorization of different prayers. So my ordination is in between because the bishop in Holy Trinity College at that time is close to my spiritual fathers, and they knew me and they called me. So I'm actually ordained in the Holy Trinity University compound church at that time. But my active service was, as soon as I was ordained, was Debre Salam Stephanus Church. But I didn't serve for a long time there, like probably a month or two. Right then, I had an opportunity to come to America. Then I start serving here.
Okay. And since you've become a case, is there a message or a teaching that you've been wanting, that you've have felt inclined to teach recently, that you've kind of seen like, oh, I feel as though like people should know about this?
Oh, that there are a lot because it's what God put in your heart, especially if you see the people, your flocks, what they need when you talk to them through confession or consultation, you know what is needed for them. It's not what they want, but what they needed, right? So from time to time, it was different. And I don't know recently if you had a chance to see some of the sermons that the series that we were giving here in our church is what God inclined in my heart to teach about is complacency and feeling that we're okay in spirituality just because we come to church, because we're Christian, because our background is this, but actually in actuality that we are so far away from God. So that was what I was teaching. But every time there are different topics that God put in my heart, I feel like the next two very important parts is about um, the awareness of mental health, mental spectrum, and people, especially children, that are being affected by these things, and making aware of our society about that and what it entails. That has been in my heart, but also the other thing that definitely I'm gonna in a very near future I wanted to teach is about also the divine liturgy, because there are a lot of people who think it in a cultural sense, not in truly understanding of the deeper meaning and every processions within the liturgy, what it means. So in general, it's different from time to time. It's different what we need to be addressing for the congregation we see that God put out in our heart and as we see it fit for them.
And I definitely agree. I think, as you were saying, like not everybody needs the exact same thing, and times constantly change. I mean, the conversations that you're wanting to have about, like the current stance of like young people, especially in like America, we live in a very different society than our parents did, or like our like aunts and uncles did. And I think opening these conversations, especially within the church, is very impactful because the church should be our safe space.
Mm-hmm.
So by opening up these conversations, I think it's wonderful. And especially considering like the work that you and your church are beginning to do, it's really it's creating a big impact as well. I've noticed a lot of like churches, especially ours, like we're starting to implement a lot of different things because we saw them on SPAT as well. And speaking of SPAT, can you give me a brief history of like the beginnings of SPAT and your involvement?
Yeah, it's an interesting and it's a long story. Actually, in a very near future, we're actually working on a documentary movie of the whole spot creation from every angle of every people. Through the grace of God, it'd be an actual movie, and we're working on that. But um, just to give a brief, history. Um, so young Orthodox taught Christians started because of the need at that time. There was no English events or English guvais, if you will, ministry or teaching or that. It wasn't well formed and it wasn't well known. I'm not saying there wasn't none, but at the same time, it wasn't broadcasted as the way it needed to be. And when we do it the first time, we met or people come unexpectedly without our expectation. There were a lot of people that came on the first event, which ignited for us to be gathered together and to try to create a youth organization at that time. This I'm talking about maybe 10, 12 years ago, right? We had sister churches who are very supportive and that we can go and also like get some lesson and from them experience how to implement. But then we continued as just an organization for a while, um, and I remember one of the days, especially even becoming before I become a priest, is the day that some of the people that I heard were really complaining that they're ready to confess their sins, but they wasn't able to find a priest that they can speak the same language. And that's where actually motivated me to pursue in the life of priesthood at that moment. But then even after that, we can do the sacrament of confession, but there is no place in the language they understand they can perform of the sacrament of communion, because the liturgy was not um, um, constructed or given to the people in English predominantly, right? Of course, there were some in New York or in other churches that were established a long time ago, but there are just a few congregations there, right? And it wasn't addressed the massively growing the Ethiopian youth community who speaks English. So we start thinking about, okay, what can we do? So we are planning that in the next maybe 10 years that the Ethiopian Orthodox Church would have an English ministry churches, because we go to Coptic English ministry churches and others, they have multiple of that. So our goal is, okay, maybe in the next 10 years, right? But God has a completely different plan. So 3 years before the establishment of St. Paul, we had a chance to gather with some, servants and to think about, okay, is this feasible? So what we say is, not right now, but let's just, meet up at least once a month and think about what we can do as building a church. And then that's where, when on one of the days, I was just sitting down and thinking about, if we establish a church, what would be the name? That's where SPAT came, because I truly believe that St. Paul is very much an example and a model for what we're trying to do, because he's from a Judaic background, but we're called for the Jew people, for the Gentiles, and in the same way that, even though, like, it's easier for me to go to any church, participate in the Mahalit, in the liturgy, and all of the the cultural, traditional, the Ge'ez and Amharic based services, but we truly believe that most of us at that time are called to serve for those that are English speaking. So St. Paul would be the best patron saint for us at that time. So we said St. St. Paul, Ethiopian Orthodox Church, but the SPAT has a very nice ring to it, so we kind of abbreviated it, took some words out, and said like St. Paul Orthodox Church. But Orthodox Tawahedo describes Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo as well. So St. Paul or SPAT comes from there, and we start meeting up for almost 3-4 years. But throughout that process, we had a lot of going back and forth of ideas, what we need to do, how we can talk to the bishop, how we can sell or convey the message of the need of an English ministry church, so that it would be so that the bishop would believe it and fully support it, right? So we had to do all those works. We started giving our tithing 3 years before starting of the church. So starting from there, we continued, saving our tithing and collecting some more people who've been asked us of, okay, why don't you guys establish a church? And we've been reaching out to those people, and through the grace of God, 2 years ago, now we're going to celebrate the end of 2 years in this coming July month. But we found a place. One of our sisters found a place for the church, and we were able to establish on that day. That's not to spill anything, because, as I said, we have a documentary coming out, but this is a nutshell what we've worked on.
Well, first of all, congratulations on finding a place for your church, and early congratulations on the 2-year anniversary. I'm actually quite surprised. I thought like SPAT was an older church. I didn't know it was so young.
No, so we didn't even finish our 2 years, and that's how you see so much need of it. Now the church that we leased, the occupancy is like 400 something, 420, but every Sunday it's more than that. Like we're over capacity even now. We have more than 200 students in Sunday school that are been learning. We have more than 16, 17 deacons serving. Through the grace of God, now we have 3 priests serving. So, within these 2 years, it's been growing. And this should also give an encouragement for the youth, the young adults, and even for churches of different state that if we want to preserve the Ethiopian Orthodox Tewahedo Church for the next generation, this is also the way to go.
I definitely agree, especially considering like within like America, like Ethiopian and Eritrean youth, like it's becoming an epidemic that they're having trouble connecting with the church because of the language barrier.
Mm-hmm.
I think taking this initiative to bring it to them and build this community is absolutely admirable. I believe so. And I think, especially considering like the DMV area is so like the Ethiopian and Eritrean population is it's so densely populated there.
Yeah.
Like there's probably so many youth that are trying to find a space like this, especially considering like me personally, the way I learned Amarinya and the way I learned about my culture was through the church. If I wouldn't know Amarinya if I didn't go to Sunday school or I didn't meet the people that I met at church. And just the community is so it it doesn't just wrap around the church, it is the church. Like there should be a place there for everyone. And I think this initiative is amazing. It's so like amazing to look at.
Thanks.
What do you think the future holds for SPAT and the Ethiopian Orthodox Church community?
So actually, when I come to your church, one of our beloved father, Abba Theodros, also is a very, very kind supporter and advisor in many ways. And he brought to me some ideas of what we've been also thinking about, right? But um, I think for me, and even for our crew here, um our goal or dream or what we wish for St. Paul is not just only to be a church. A parish church is good. You could help people to grow spiritually by providing the sacraments of the church within the church. But I truly believe we believe that the church is not only just a building. I believe that the church needs to be um, more than a building and then more than Sunday service. So the plan or the wish is in the future to have multiple different institutes of SPAT. It could be an orphanage, it could be a kindergarten, it could be a rehabilitation center, it could be so not even only in the DMV area, but in anywhere, but to have like huge I would say community-based service in every aspect of that the Orthodox Tewahedo youth needs, right? Uh, because sometimes it's easy just to be within the church and you do your services and everything, but there are so many things that are the church are not being able because of multiple reasons that shouldn't get into now, but that we need to be helping the community. We know that in the Bible that there are limited times that Christ taught in the temple. You see Christ teaching in the mountains. You see Christ teachings in the apostles' house or in a gathering. So that tells us that is the church should not be only confined within the building of a church. Of course, that's where you participate the sacraments and do the ultimate worship of the communal worship. But there are so many things that the church can do that our forefathers, even in Ethiopia, used to do. I don't know if you know, but for example, there are older hospitals that are built by the support of the church. So Emmanuel Hospital is for the mentally sick people, is by the church by the name of Emmanuel, the church, and also the same thing. St. Paul and St. Peter. There's a school. In the Medani there's a school. So I think we need to grow from just a parish focused church in general to different things. Like I mentioned, like it could be orphanages, it could be like a bakery. Like there has to be, dispersed in the multiple venues of the church that it could sustain itself, but also provide for their own congregation.
I think building a network is a wonderful idea, especially because you're right. Like it shouldn't just be going to church. I think building that community where people and especially the youth can come to, like in the name of God, is wonderful. Especially like I know within our own church, like I know a lot of the youth, we love being there. We love staying there. We'll stay there for hours on end if we have like
Yeah,
programs. Like we'll literally stay there for like 2, 3 hours at a time. We'll be sitting talking in the parking lot just
yeah,
to be together and
yeah.
to build these things. I think it'll just encourage the youth to not only involve themselves more within the church and involve themselves with like their spiritual life in God. It just builds them someplace to go to.
Absolutely. And it alleviates of you being only a Sunday Christian, you know? So imagine like if we have SPAT clinic or whatever church, like Kidane Mihret clinic, right? Of course, there are so many of our sisters who are nurses, right? They could be hired there. They could provide for their family, but at the same time, the community there would be someone who could uphold you to have that spiritual values, that Christian values as well. And very recently, one of my relatives and my wife, they went to a clinic that provides a free health service, and it was fully of I think uh, by some mosque or a Muslim people are the one who established it, and they're giving it freely. But all the people that are there are devoted Muslims, right? So yeah, that should truly create a zeal within my heart, our heart. Why don't we have that? And then everything is, if we are gathered together having a one mindset and with the grace of God, there's like we can accomplish multiple things, right? There are so many people who are working in protecting the elders in the elder assistance housing, right? So why don't we have similar to that for the elders? People that are therapists or psychiatrists, why don't we have rehabilitation center that all our own people that are very well educated would be hired. They could provide for their families and for themselves, but also uphold the Christian value within their within that working place. So that is the future goal for St. Paul and for, I believe, the next English ministry movement.
Definitely agree. It actually reminds me of a conversation I had with Kesis Abaineh a while back when he came to visit. I remember I asked him about like careers and things like that. And I remember he said, a career isn't a bad thing, but always have God centered around it. And I think to build a sort of community and network that has these different programs, I think that's a like perfect way of kind of accomplishing that goal of building your career, because you're right, there's nurses, there's like psychiatrists, there's so many. The Ethiopian community has so much potential, and there's so many of us that are going on doing so many different things, and if they have a inclination to have their career like God centered, it's a perfect opportunity to do that.
Absolutely. Yep.
Um, to continue on, as we know, like Spot Church definitely has a very prominent online presence, which has very much impacted so many like people, and it's become like the kind of forefront of a lot of Spot, because you see your online service, you guys always stream like Adase and many different things, and all your programs as well. How do you believe building Spot's online presence has positively impacted the church and the community?
Yeah, absolutely. I believe that it helped so much, and uh, in a positive way mainly, but when the start of it wasn't as positive, but we were very cognizant of that. We were very cautious, and we knew that we started something new. We knew that there are going to be a lot of scrutiny, a lot of setbacks from people to truly see of our vision. and it's through only God's grace and His wisdom and His help us that we were able to withstand all those and then move on. But as in anything that a new thing that you started, there's always negative comments and people are discouraging you here and there, calling you names and all of those. But as long as you stay true of your mission, that's what helped us, right? And if you see of our messages, they're always so we would try to focus always to uphold the mission of the church. The mission of the church is to foster a community which would come and learn and transform through by the living the life of Christ-like life through the apostolic teachings of the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. That's the mission. But so always reminding of that mission. So when people are coming, ours is giving the message in the way and the language they understand. We know that our church is a mission church, which is different. The mission church means people would come and be transformed. In we are focused on getting people that are straight away, people that never know of orthodoxy before. So if there is a call or an inquiry from, for example, whatever organization to come and support of some political agenda, for example, right? That's not our mission. I'm not saying we shouldn't do it or do it. That's a personal opinion, but that's not our mission. So staying for our mission, I don't know if you had a chance to see, is like every 2 or 3 times a year, more than ever, we're baptizing so many people in the Ethiopian Orthodox faith. We have so many people that are partaking communion, more than that expected. Right now, like it would take us mostly like an hour to finish of the partaking of the communion. So we have to design a way of doing liturgies in two ways and to provide that as well. So I think staying true and focused on your mission and not to get distracted and to be going into where you're not called, right? So always we remind ourselves, okay, our calling is this. We're not saying this is not right, this is wrong. Maybe, like, for example, if people would come and say, like, why don't you do Kidase in Amharic? We're not against that, but there is like 40 churches in the DMV area that give that. So we focus on what is not there, and we focus on and stay true to our mission. And I think that's what makes it eventually people to see the benefit of it. And our media presence are positive after that. But of course, there were setbacks. But after they see the fruits of what we're doing, it's been very positive. We had very vigilant and tireless brothers and sisters who are focused on, like, every Sunday working on the recordings and the uploading of the videos, coming up with creating different creative ways to convey the message of Christ, right? So I think that's been very helpful, especially now that the youth, the young adults, are mostly in media, in social media. That's what helped us.
I was actually going to ask a question about your youth within the within SPAT. I was actually wondering, like, how do you try to involve the youth as much as possible within like the workings of like SPAT, especially like whether it be like young deacons or within the media team or like like projects that you're doing, like how do you try to like involve them as much as possible?
So I think, as we say, through the grace of God, our church is even the structure wise is designed completely different than it's in a typical and a traditional way, right? So, for example, our Sunday school is not the typical Sunday school that within the churches. Our Sunday school is designed as school. So what it means is people from same way when you go to school, there is lower elementary, upper elementary, middle school, high school. That is the classification. When you finish the high school, you're not going to be in a Sunday school anymore. There is no Sunday school for you. Sunday school are not primarily attributed for singing. No, we have our own choir group to do the singing, but the Sunday school is just teaching and, make them a fruitful people in a spiritual life. How to, when they go to college or in high school, how to overcome of all things that they struggle. And we focus on those things. And people, after they finish high school and when they go to college, we have a very constant contact with them. But then if they're around the DMV area, they will be assigned to the different teams that the church has. The church has so many different teams to accommodate of and whatever interest that you have, right? There's a production team, there is a refreshment, there is a greeting or ushering team, and all of those. So every servant is serving in every places. There is what I mean by that is there's a designated responsibility, but that's not only their own responsibility. Easy example to give, for example, is the deacons. They're not assigned only to do this work in the Holy of Holies on the liturgy. Of course, they're ordained for that. They're ordained for that, but they're not called only to do those. As the same way, if you read in the book of Acts, Saint Stephen, the first deacon, and all of them, they are called to disperse foods, prepare food and disperse foods, right? So I think that's what helped us, and my wish and hope prayer in the future is truly every church to have the same thing. So deacons in St. Paul Church, for example, once a month, they are the ones who's assigned to do refreshments. So after liturgy, they took out their clothes quickly. They go into the Shai Dabo area. They're the ones who's going to pour Shai Dabo, give to the people food, are the deacons. And in the same way, like they serve Sunday school teaching, not only just the Kandasi, right? So I think that helps the young adults not to be bystanders, right? They just don't stand and wait. They come and they participate. And whenever he thinks that they see there's need, they wouldn't, they would just jump right in there and help out. Of course, we give them guidance, but there's always room for different services within the church, as it should be. Not only, choir or Sabaka Gubaye. No, like there are so many other aspects. So now, even for example, we have 35 and up adults, they have their own groups. Young adults, they have their own groups. 25 and above, right? The Sunday school, the choir, the staff, the servants. So in multiple places, and the parents committee, all of them, they have their own initiation, and I think that's what helps whoever wants, and what God put in his heart or in her heart to serve. There is always an opportunity to do.
I think that's, I don't know how many times I can say like wonderful, like amazing. I think honestly, like getting people involved and really like, I think the point that you made that like not everybody's set to one thing, like everybody's constantly helping each other. They have their place. Again, there's always something to do. It establishes the point that you were making that it takes a community to build these things. And just allowing everyone to feel more involved and really feel like they're also a part of this church, I feel like it'll definitely project you forward when it comes to like growing and getting bigger, because it makes the community more tight knit, and it really upholds a lot of the values of the church of being together. And
that's what the church means, right? And then when you read the first century Christians in the book of Acts, they live in one accord as one family, right? So if you see, for example, you work in a multimedia, but like let's say if you see people that are in Dejja Salam or need help, like trying to jump in and help out, or in any aspect that is needed, right? Because that is your sister, that is your brother there that needed help. So and it's your church in every aspect, helping in that way is what makes, and for the youth, not to see them as, oh, they're young, they're no, like if especially I've learned in this country after when they are after high school or even in high school, like if you give them a responsibility, they definitely are responsible to accomplish things, right? So we do that. Like if people are coming in the congregation, if they're young, even right, like putting the holy water or getting the staff, the mekwamias, and all. Start with that, but then um, given a more higher responsibility, because I wouldn't see that us, including me, to be as the administrator for 20, 30 years, right? And it's not, that's not progress in my in my opinion, right? The true progression is finding someone and cultivating someone to work as me and even more than me with the same vision, and giving him the same opportunity as me, and then me probably staying back, and then in that way everyone can profit their talent that is given to them.
I definitely agree. Like everybody has something to contribute, and they're always going to be useful. And especially if you contributed to building something like the church, like you should definitely contribute that. And I think finding it also allows people to find their place, because the church is for everyone. And if you can find some way to feel as though you belong, I think that's what everybody really strives for. So now we'll be entering our kind of our advice, like Q&A type of section. So one of the first questions, since we were talking about it earlier, how would you approach presenting the Ethiopian Orthodox Church to a non-member, especially considering like that is mostly your goal? How do you tend to approach that, especially somebody who comes to, let's say, your church and they're like, I want to join the church. I may not be Ethiopian, or I may not be, I may be new to the religion. Then I want to practice, like I want to learn or I want to practice.
So we have our, especially within the clergy and the deacons, we have this unspoken understanding that we already learned before we start serving, that if we see someone new within the church, even it would be an Ethiopian background or even other background, that we kind of set aside anything that we're working on and make that person to feel very, as much as possible welcome, answer any of the questions that he has, make him comfortable, make her comfortable. And sometimes I understand it, because of the magnitude of people that there is in different churches, it's hard to see, but I believe that all the churches has to focus on this, right? So when a new person would come, because they do the same thing in other denomination churches. Like if I go in another denomination church, like they, welcome me in a way that like I'm a king, right? They would give me different things. They would give me a ride. They would keep calling me and all of those. But we don't do that. We shouldn't do this. One, because the others does it. Two, we shouldn't do this out of ingenuity, not without a genuine heart. But we should do it anyways with a genuine heart, because that flock, that person, is what God brought into the church. And actually, when you were bringing up this question, I thought first you were asking that how we could bring people, but in your question is, for example, the people that are rebaptizing, right? We never called them. We never went outside of the church to bring people, which we should have done, right? And we fall short of that, and we're very, slow and very, not able to do that because of multiple reasons. But God by Himself brought people. So at least if we are not able to go outside and then evangelize and bring people, at least it's very minute and little thing to do, the people that God brings to the church, to make them very welcome, comfortable, and giving them good care, and like show that you truly they mean something because of course they do, right? So we have that in all of our mindsets, even though sometimes we get distracted because of our own friends. But when we see new people, like we go to sit down and to talk to them and to conversate with them, make them feel welcome, um, which we need to do more of those. And by no means we are at best in that area that we I wish in the near future to be. But I think that's what matters in our church. That what we need to do. If I like now, for example, I get to know you, and like we talked and everything. Next time when you come with your friend, maybe I wouldn't give you that much attention to you, but I have to give attention to the new person, right? So that's the way I see it. Um, the new person who already joined the faith and start practicing the faith, he is like the elder brother of the prodigal son. So he's already in the family, in the house of the Lord. So focusing on the prodigal, or the person who's new, who's straight away, who are maybe seeing you, and the way that you, even to the point of knowing their names, can change their perspective about the church. So I think having good care of that may help to bring people to the church.
I definitely agree. I have a lot of conversations with even my like non-Tibetan Orthodox friends. Like, um, I'll have conversations with them. They're like, "Oh, I was like baptized within this one religion, but I felt so unwelcome," or I had like, or it was simply like I was going because my parents were going, or I felt pressure, and they kind of, or they had like a bad experience, so now they don't want to follow that faith anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the saddest thing because sometimes like whenever they're telling me these like experiences, and I kind of sit there and I'm just like, wow, like how, if I wish you hadn't felt as like unwelcome, regardless
Mm-hmm.
of like whatever like religion it was, like you shouldn't feel so unwelcome in such a place. And I think especially considering like you can even talk about within like Ethiopian like or Eritrean society, like we do have a tendency to be a little bit judgmental sometimes. It is a bit of a flaw that we have. However, I think, especially with the newer generation, we're striving to be more inclusive. We're striving to bring people together because we understand that feeling of, like it's really awkward. I don't feel like right here. And I think having that message of we want new people to feel okay. And once they're in and they're in that community, we still take care of them. I think it's wonderful. I think um we should constantly be striving to create that, especially like within a community. If you don't feel welcome in a community, you won't feel welcome anywhere.
Absolutely. And it's easy for, like, if you grow in Ethiopia, like everyone is the church. Um, there is not a lot of emotional sensitivity in a way, right? But in here, there's a lot of things against you, the stress, and there are so many, trials mentally, especially in this country. So being a little bit of, a hope of light for someone, maybe you never know, right? But um, sparking that giving that hope for one person, and you may probably gone after that, you may not notice him, but because of the word that you told him, an uplifting word, he may stay within the church. So I think we need to be very vigilant and aware of these things.
Okay. Um, in like kind of within that realm, what advice would you kind of give to young adults and teens? Because we were just talking about like Ethiopian culture and things like that. How would you kind of help them if they were to come to you talking about struggling balancing their heritage with their spiritual lifestyle? Because yes, Ethiopian culture and I guess Eritrean culture as well, it like church and religion, we are a very religious, like we're very religious countries. And sometimes people have a little bit of a hard time trying to balance both, especially considering we live in America and we're a bit detached from those cultures, even if we have like a community with us. How can we balance our heritage with our spiritual lifestyle? Because even there's some people even having debates of like, oh, should I have a Chifara graduation versus a Mesmer one and things like that? And those kind of conversations within like their own, like between each other, it's kind of hard to say because it's nobody really knows how to like approach that kind of idea. So I thought I should.
You brought up a whole lot of points there. And I think I may be a little bit different on this area because I always have a hard time to believe when we say that we are a very spiritual country, right? I'm not saying that our forefathers are not. They were absolutely, they were. And their works manifest for that. Their works tell us how they used to live their life, what they were priorities in their life, how they dedicated their life into the life of Christ-like life, right? But you know, in my age right now, I'm getting a little older, but since I was young, I have not seen that into our generation or even an immediate parents' generation of what we are told of. We are spiritual Christian people, right? I would believe and agree that culturally, yes, we are. In all the cultures that there is, it's in bits of a little bit of the manifestation of Christianity, like our clothes, all our jewelries, our greetings, and all of those. I understand that, but truly, like since I was young, what I've seen is always racial hatred, war, you know, division, and all these things. Now, I'm not talking about in a country level. I'm talking about in a family level, right? So while you're saying this, for me, I always have a hard time of believing that if we are truly like living as a Christ-like life, and can we say with our full heart and with boldly with our full mouth saying that we're spiritual Christian nation, right? Now, having said that, because as you mentioned that the culture and the holy tradition or the historical facts of the church are kind of intertwined together, how to navigate that for the people that are in this country where their culture is drastically different than the culture that is back home. I understand how there is a confusion for them. I understand that there is not only just outside of church cultural shock, but a spiritual cultural shock as well. What I mean by that is like, for example, for Easter or for nativity, right? Like we celebrate at night, and there was a liturgy, and we wear white. Everyone wears white. We say Christos Tensa, like Christ Anesti, and all of this. We say that, and when we stand on the liturgy, none of us partake of the communion. And for the young people, they notice that. They notice that. You know what the kids would say, subconsciously believe, and I told this in our congregation as well for the older generation, the older people. We force the kids until they're 18, 17, 18 to partake communion, right? We force them. After that, what do you say? Like, oh, you don't have to take them. They don't have to say that, the parents, but the children will learn that because what they see is their parents are not partaking of the communion, right? So in their mind, subconsciously, they say like, oh, until I reach 17 or 18, I would declare for myself that I'm not partaking communion because I'm old. Because we have divided, oh, you should partake communion when you're young, when you're old, you're off the hook, right? That is the teaching that we're teaching them. Now, in that Easter, whatever, we are not part, and then we come home, and then you see the culture of like the bunna ceremony, the food and everything, and you gather there and you talk politics and you talk hatred amongst each other, gossiping about your uncle, your aunt, and the kids notice that. So it's not only a cultural shock because they're living in an American world, but they also have a spiritual cultural shock, because what they see is the outwardly appearance of Christians, but not truly people that are living in what they preach or what they're learned, right? So because of that, I truly agree of, by the way, when people come to parents would come to me to say like, oh, mikaro my child, or like admonish my child, right? I always say no. What I would say is, okay, go. I'll tell the parent to go. I'll talk to the kid or the young child by himself, and then we just sit down and we talk. Sometimes we just talk about football, and sometimes we talk about, like, to engage with them and to know them and to know their struggles, right? Rather than saying like, why are you not listening to your parents? At the same time, the parents are listening to their heavenly parent, who's God. How could I say that? How could I say listen to your parents if the parents is not listening to God? It's hard. So I totally understand of the shock that the young adults or the adults are having an abusive family, parents, and then bringing the children into the church to be a good Christian-like righteous person. What benefit is there, right? So the way we approach it here is, everyone that comes to the church or to learn the word of God, or even to assimilate of the true authentic tradition, the holy tradition of the church, is, I always tell, is search your intention. You brought up an example of on their graduation having a chafara or a mazmur, right? For me, the way I hate answering questions of like, is it a sin or not? And remember, I mentioned that in your gathering there as well. What I say is just search your intention, right? Search your intention. If the kid for that day, not to be obedient to their parents and not to be dismissive of their parents, if they are doing a traditional chafara, whatever, and if it's there, maybe this doesn't mean anything, right? But what matters is, what is his intention. All the righteous people that we know of within in the Bible, is the example, the three children, they were in the city of Babylon, which is all destruction, idol worshiping and everything, but they stayed true to their faith. So if this person who's graduated stay true in his faith, in his heart for God, but I don't want to associate with all these things that are doing, but like their parents, that's how they grew up, that's how they know. But I am truly, I'll give honor to you for allowing me to reach this moment in my life, and I worship you. I truly believe God honors that, right? So instead of seeing, okay, is it a sin or not, like, see the intention, see your heart. I know people would do a choir or song ceremony for their celebration just to have a hype, like to have lit chafara, right, on the cover and everything. So was that intention godly? No. So the thing is, God sees the heart. God does not see of the outside actions, and we've seen it in multiple places within the Bible. So that's the way I see it. But the shock that people have to assimilate with the church's holy tradition is, as I actually taught it last Sunday about a message that come and see of the church. Ask questions, ask genuine questions, and at least I believe and I know that finding a right instructor or teacher, their answers would be, their questions would be answered correctly, and that would also enable them to stay within the church, honoring of the holy tradition of the church.
Thank you so much for your answer. I think you answered that very well. I feel like it brings back a lot. Thank you for answering all my points, actually. Like, I'm very shocked that you're able to answer everything. But yeah, I definitely think it is all about intention, because you were right. You mentioned a good point of sometimes people will do Jafar or like a Mezmur. Especially I've noticed this a lot with like Mezmur. Sometimes they'll do a Mezmur like graduation. They're like, oh, we're gonna get lit. And I'm like, how do you get lit to Mezmur? I don't understand. Or they're like, oh, I want to do Jafara. Like, and I'm like, you know what? Go ahead. You like you felt like a true, like it's whatever like you think is correct. Goodness is it's a topic that it's all for interpretation.
God sees intention. God sees your heart, and based on your heart, where your heart is, based on where your heart is, God blesses you, or God shows you the right way. I truly believe that.
Okay, my next question, actually speaking of related to that, how would you say people can conduct themselves in a more Christ-like manner inside and outside of the church?
Um, it's mostly based on discipline, right? Um, you wouldn't see a lot of people within the church not acting Christ-like. Of course, sometimes there are emotional outbursts and things like that, but most people act or um, play to act like Christ, right? You see them, okay, like I don't deserve this, and all of those things within the church. But as soon as we go outside of the church, we are all different. We are all different. So I think where it comes from is first we are not truly believers of God's omnipresence in our life, right? That God is present everywhere, and God should be worshipped everywhere. The same reverence that you give in the Holy of Holies, are you giving that into your household? Or the same reverence and meekness that you're showing within the church, are you doing that in your workplace or in your school work or whatever, right? So um, for a lot of us, it all comes down to faith. Do we actually have faith that God is present everywhere and needs to be worshipped in every place? I think we have a hard time to understand that. That's the first thing. The second thing is, if we believe that, of course, sometimes we may forget or get distracted. Uh, but in times of God's nudging in our life, what I usually call is the honeymoon phase of spirituality. Everyone has that. Like when we come to church, we're more fervent for probably 3 months, 4 months, and then we fall back. But I think God gives us those kind of moments so that we could establish a habit, right? So if we are establishing a habit of designated structured prayer, scripture reading, spiritual books reading, listening to sermons, a very structured chores, spiritual chores. I think it's not too much of a problem for a person to get distracted because he's already in that routine in his life, right? So I think that's the first thing I would say, is just build a habit and a routine of doing the spiritual chores that especially your confessional father or your church leaders are recommended for you. Doing that will help you to continue in your day-to-day life. Because if you don't do that, you can't bring it from anywhere. When someone crosses the road, like cross you while you're driving, unless you train yourself of to truly be compassionate, understand from the other person's point, and having praises in your mouth, always praising. And if you don't practice it always, it's going to happen is other things going to fill your heart, other things fill your mind. So it's hard to live as one person. It's going to be hard to live one life. So we start building double lives.
Continue. So sorry.
Okay, good. Yeah.
I'm okay.
So yeah, it would be hard for us, and when we come to our church, we act spiritual, we act very humble, and everything when we go outside will be different because we didn't practice it. So from my experience of as a service as a priest, the hardest thing to do is building a habit and a ritual and a routine of spiritual things. If we do that, I think it gets easier.
It definitely will get easier. I think, yeah, definitely like I think something you had mentioned in the beginning towards like some people may act some way and within the church without like outside of the church it may be different. And I think building that habit will help. It reminded me of something I had read in Diakon Dawit Muruna's book, I Need Answers.
Mm-hmm.
It reminded me of the cover of the book because because the cover is of a man. He's like talking to a gay sort of
Mm-hmm.
and he's just wearing regular clothes. I think he has a natala on. Then it just reminded me of like that kind of juxtaposition because it kind of shows like there's like a very stark difference and it's kind of hard to like live in a Christly manner without building that habit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something he does mention within the book is that I mean the entirety of the book is just I need answers. It's him answering common questions that a lot of people have in a way that makes sense to them. And I think your answer definitely reminded me of that book because that made total sense to me to find a way to be more Christ-like within and outside of the church. It's just to build a habit. And you had mentioned that during our discussion during our English liturgy program. I think it was just a big circle moment that I thought was
I'm glad.
Speaking of responsibility, because I remember you had mentioned like it does take a lot of responsibility and discipline, especially within the youth, like young deacons, they have a lot of responsibilities, just as deacons in general. And I was wondering, what advice would you give young deacons who are struggling to manage the deaconhood and their responsibilities, whilst balancing their life outside of the church?
Who did tell you that they have a lot of responsibility?
A lot of
maybe
friends tell me they have like lots of things to do.
I think I believe that worshiping shouldn't be considered as a responsibility. Of course, there is other things that are responsible. They need to be responsible of like leading the liturgy or other works that they did within the Beit HaMikdash. I understand that. But standing and worshiping and participating in the prayers, that is by no means a responsibility to the point it becomes cumbersome. That is a time for you, for me, for a deacon, for anyone to stand and to praise him for yet again giving us another week, another month, another health, family, all those things, right? So it's your worshiping time. I think that's what lacks for our brothers in a lot of aspects because we consider it as a work, a responsibility. So when we go to the Qadasi or the liturgy, we're working rather than we're giving praise, we're worshiping, right? When you see the story of Noah being saved from the flood, the great flood, he didn't direct all the animals into the ship into the ship and say go forth and be saved. He also went into the ship. Same way when you learn about Moses did not direct the people to go into the parting of the sea. He was the one who's leading them. So in the same way, he's saving himself from the pharaohs following them. You know what I'm saying? So I think understanding that when you are standing in the liturgy, or you could be a main deacon, or a person who's doing other things, like a reader, right? Regarding yourself that, okay, God put you in that position to say these things, to lead these things, but you're also saving yourself. You're also saving yourself, right? I think that mentality needs to be imprinted in the servant's mind, right? So if that's the case, in your mindset, all the things that you think of responsibilities is actually not a responsibility. It's a privilege. It's a privilege for you to stand there and then to give honor. Other than that, I think we have to divide for the people that are already ordained or is going to be ordained in the future. For the people that are going to be ordained in the future, I truly believe that they have to know the responsibilities deeply first before getting into the deaconhood or the levels of the deaconhood, right? I think because of scarcity of people, servants, or whatever the case may be, young people are getting ordained without knowing of the responsibility of a deacon, which later on leads them to despise of that responsibility, right? So I think that needs to be corrected, in my opinion. But the people that are already deacons, first off, knowing that whoever wants to be greater, let him be lesser of everyone. That is the Christ's teaching. So knowing that they're not on a pedestal, they're not on a shining spot of like this fame. No, actually, they are the bottom of the congregation. They're ordained to be the servants of the congregation. You know, one of the servants, one of the congregation lady said, my child helped me to cross the road. And if someone asks him, come and hit the kabero, which one are you choosing? You know, that matters. So you are chosen to be the lesser of everyone, to serve everyone, not to shine. Not to shine. So truly learning this is going to help them, but also to be the participants of the sacrament of the life of confession, the life of communion, the life of unction of the sick, the life of all these repeatable sacraments. Being part of that is definitely needed. You know, being a deacon but not participating into the sacrament of communion, unless you are the one who's doing Qadasi, is ridiculous. It's very ridiculous, and because of that is why we were seeing a lot of setbacks in retaining people that are deacons to continue into be faithful servants in older ages, because we don't train them this. So being participants of the sacraments of communion, sacraments of confession, since they are ordained, is very much essential in their service, very essential. So we can't be medicine givers if we are not partaking the medicine for ourselves, because we are all sick, right? So those are the things that are that they need to learn. The one who reveals wisdom for the servants or for anyone is God, and that God is revealed through His Son through the sacrament of communion, when Christ is present in the bread and the holy flesh and wine, right? In His holy flesh and blood. So if they are not being part of that, and Christ being dwelling within them, all the wisdom would be earthly. That's why we know in our church in the old times, Saint Peter would stand and preach, and 3,000 people would get baptized. All our old forefathers, the forefathers like Saint Clement and everyone, they would go to different countries. They would stand, and by teaching once, they would baptize so many people. They would break people's heart. They would break people's heart. Now, what are we breaking? We stand and then preach. We preach division, and we see all the people applauding us, but not applauding God. Right? So I think the way that we need to progress spiritually and be in a better place as a servant, as a deacon, as a priest, as a church choir, whatever service may be, is to actually sit down and then redirect of our attention, and instead of for just being performative service to transformative service, instead of focusing on the performative service, transformative, right? How many people come and stand on the mahalit versus how many people come and partake communion? How many people come and hang out and in like a nigs celebration, rather than how many people are persistently talking to their confession father and living the life of repentance? So there are so many things that we need our focus to be geared towards. If we do that, I think we'll have a lot of progress. But it's a long way to go, very long way to go.
Yeah, I think it does require a kind of mindset change, especially considering like I remember I had a conversation with a young deacon that was a friend of mine. I think we were having a conversation about how like why there were so many young deacons and why like they were being ordained so young. Because I think I had mentioned I was like we have deacons within our like our own like church that are as young as like 8, 9 years old and they haven't even hit double digits yet. And I'm sitting here and I'm like I'm baffled. Like they're so young. How like why? And I remember he was telling me the story of why we have like culturally have so many young deacons, and it was because of the fact that we didn't have a patriarch for almost 200 years, and how whenever they would like a patriarch would be sent from Egypt, um, and the only time they would come into the area, people would just present their sons and they would teach and then they'd get ordained, and because there was such a shortage.
Mm-hmm.
I think that mindset has kind of started to come more and more, and it became a thing of having young deacons, or just kind of ordaining them as much as possible and having a plethora of them. But as you mentioned, like the retention isn't there because we're not actively teaching them um, the importance of their position and how it isn't like a job. It's
And yeah, they cannot retain even though we tell them in that age. That's why in other sister churches there is a level of deaconhood, or to be in a full deacon. There are so many levels to go. So you see young deacons wearing the cloth and maybe having their singing like symbols like it's an asshole for us, and that's completely fine. That's actually admirable because it kind of makes them to feel they are in the church and feel happy, and that's great. But since, as you mentioned, because of historical distortion long time ago, and because of a lot of trials, we didn't have servants, so everyone is ordained full deacon since they were 8, 9 year old, and it become a norm after that. That's what this it's created this, and 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 uh, we don't care for their life when they're in college, when they're in high school, right? When that temptation comes, when they felt like they're isolated, right? We didn't prepare any room for that when that happens, any community of for their kind. So I'll be by myself. I remember when I was in college, in the university, that I was in a rented house that 4 or 5 of us rented, and every Saturday there is like a huge party in the house, a huge party, and I had to lock the door and sit in the room by myself. Um, and I was a bit older, so maybe that wasn't that much affected me. But imagine a person who's like 18, 19, 20 years old standing and being tempted by hearing, listening, and all of those things, right? So I think what we need to do is finding a level of commitment giving to the young ones also, like they could do small things here and there, but not giving the full title responsibility for deaconhood, because they don't know what it pertains, they don't know what it tells, right? So eventually in the future, hopefully that we get back to the right way of doing it. But yeah, that's the problem.
Yeah, I think, and you could also say it might bleed into other like aspects of the church, where it be like not even just the deacons, it could be like just responsibilities throughout the church. Whereas it starts to become less of oh, I'm doing this for the sake of like providing for my church or for like the sake of serving God. It becomes a kind of a performative thing, like we were speaking on earlier. It's so, I guess, wild to me because you see these things and you see these people. It's kind of like the whole point of like, oh, you can be the loudest person like uh at the front of the church, like doing kadase and things like that, and then you turn around and you don't know what they're doing. And I think it is because we have kind of gotten to a place where we're not in the right mindset of why we're doing these things. And it kind of begs the question of how and who should be fixing it. Definitely it does fall upon the person doing it because it should it should be brought up to their attention like, hey, maybe your mindset should be changed, but who should be telling them that? Should it be the person next to them that is in the same position, or is it somebody of older, or you
I
know?
think I think all of us has a responsibility. First off, the main thing is we need to pray about these things. Like God give wisdom for all that are responsible to do that are responsible for all this, so that God would direct them. That's the first thing. But the second thing I truly hope is the next generation. People like you, people that are the older deacons around in your church, and the next coming generation of youth deacons who are you know in their mid 20s, late 20s, who are very cognizant and very knowledgeable of this flaw within the process. They're responsible, and they should take that responsibility, right? Because we can only take so far. So that's my belief in the near future. I had the baton, and I give that baton for another person, right? The next one should continue taking that and make actually more better for people than what I did and what we around people around me did, to correct and shine the true, the preciousness of orthodoxy for the next generation. And I truly believe if there are people who have the true desire, genuine desire to do this, God will find a way to work through them. So I believe in that. I have seen that. I'm a witness of that. So yeah.
Okay. So unfortunately, this is the end of our interview. I had a very lovely time. Thank you so much for imparting your wisdom.
No problem. That I'm so happy for this. I hope it helped a little bit, and hopefully that this message gets to our brothers and sisters who definitely need to hear this. And may God bless your service as well. You guys are,
Thank you.
even though kind of a startup, you're doing an amazing job there. When I came in, what I see, and I have high hopes for you guys. So may God fulfill that through you. Okay.
Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great one.